Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of the OTT.X webinar series, where we bring you thoughtful conversations with leaders from across OTT, CTV, and streaming. My name is Jose, and we're delighted to have you with us today. Metadata may not be the most exciting or sexiest of topics in our industry, but it is tremendously important across nearly every facet of the business it influences. It influences how content is organized, delivered, discovered, advertised, and monetized. And when something goes wrong, the impact can quickly be felt throughout the entire content supply chain. Today's panel will discuss where those challenges arise, really takes to manage content, and how clear standards, ownership, and collaboration can help. We'll also look at metadata's role in areas like discovery, advertising, and live sports, as well as where AI can make workflows smarter and more efficient while still keeping human judgment in the process. We're very excited for this session, which will be led by Kirby Grimes, founder and CEO of 4320 and the Streaming Wars. Kirby, I will hand it over to you to introduce the rest of the panel and get us started. Thank you so much for joining us today, and take it away.
Thank you very much, Jose, and killer music to open us
Thank
up.
you.
What's up, OTT.X? I'm Kirby Grimes, founder of the Streaming Wars, 4320 and the Streaming Wars. And Streaming Wars, we cover media economics and the future of streaming, do daily analysis. And so I'll get into, follow me here. A video without metadata is stupid. A streaming title unable to power identification or discovery. It's an acronym. It's the connective tissue of the content supply chain. It tells every stream what the content is, how it relates to everything around it, and what the business is allowed to do with it. Today, I don't want to spend an hour explaining that metadata matters. Instead, I want to examine where the friction enters the supply chain, what standards and identifiers can actually solve, who should own the authoritative record, and what AI changes for better and for worse. I'll guide the conversation and direct questions where needed. If panelists, if you have something to build on, qualify, or challenge, feel free to jump in. The goal is to educate from different points of view, which is why you're all here. So let's do introductions. If you could give us your name, role, and part of the metadata supply chain closest to your day-to-day, and keep your response under about 30 seconds. Let's start with you, Paul.
Hey, well, thank you, Kirby, for hosting this group. Metadata is incredibly important for everything that Amagi does. So we are, I'll start with, hi, I'm Paul Finster. I head up business development and our partner network at Amagi. I've been working with metadata for over 30 years in various roles in the industry. Incredibly important. We, as a company, Amagi, run thousands of channels for hundreds of customers. Every one of those requires metadata and metadata enrichment. And we're really excited to talk about the issues that the industry faces.
All right. Gaia?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Gaia King, a business analyst for content discovery and data compliance at PBS. And as far as metadata, how it touches my day-to-day, I do a lot of work with our local PBS stations across the country, ensuring that they meet the standards and requirements for metadata for their listings so that their shows can be discovered. So we work very closely with stations and our internal PBS teams to make sure they understand how metadata management is vital to the organization.
All right, great. And Rhodes.
Hi, Rhodes Mason, VP of Biz Dev for Fabric Data. And we offer a platform for studios and broadcasters to manage metadata throughout its life cycle. And we also offer a source of metadata where you can enrich the records using our own internal sources. And we also scan the globe for what is on streaming and be able to provide link back and complete that consumer journey when they're finding content. So discoverability is very much in our wheelhouse, as well as management of metadata throughout the supply chain.
Thank you, Rhodes. Richard.
Richard Crum, the Senior Director of Technical Operations for the Emmy Award-winning Entertainment Identifier Registry. We specialize in content identification in support of automation and promulgate metadata standards, because it all starts with the metadata.
All right, send us home, Dustin.
Thanks, Kirby. My name is Dustin, CEO of Sports Data IO. We produce sports data delivered through our APIs for 1,000+ leagues across 75 sports. Our whole universe is all around metadata, taxonomy standards on the traditional sports data side of things, and then getting involved with folks like OTT.X, IDER, and other working groups specific to live sports, trying to find a way to bridge the gap to be able to connect everything from media and entertainment to traditional sports data structures. Happy to be here.
All right. Paul, that's so Amagi sits across ingest, channel ops, playout, and distribution. Where does metadata friction enter the supply chain most often today?
Almost everywhere. And maybe I can kind of talk to some of the issues. So we work with a wide variety of channel operators, and they are sourcing metadata from a wide variety of sources. So, those sources, we did a little bit of polling of our customers back in one of our airtime webinars that we ran, and we found that 80% or more of our customers, find the reformatting of that metadata for multiple platforms is a huge issue for them. So, different platforms may need to have different field sizes, might need, fields that they may not have in their original content metadata. So it's a big struggle for our customers on that ingest side. On the distribution side, it can also be an issue in terms of, reformatting for the target platforms. What Roku or Samsung or Pluto or other platforms, desire is not always the same. And many times it's actually very different. So there's a lot of effort, whether it's manual or automated, to make sure that conforms to the end target platforms. And then I'll just add, one more layer of complexity is, as the world drives towards live events, live news, live sports, those events and the metadata around them, need to be constructed in a very timely, and hopefully automated fashion, because this is happening, almost, within hours of the event. And I'm sure Dustin can speak to that. So there are new challenges, coming to platform operators and service providers like Amagi.
Dustin, you wanna take that?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. That's really been the challenge that we've been working on over the past probably 18 months or 2 years, is trying to understand season, series, episode data structures for TV, movies, and film. But how do you backdoor that into live events? And then we've got this deeper understanding around traditional sports structures. And the reality is there's no really wrong answer when you say what's a competition, what's an event, what's a sport, because different answers can be surfaced depending on the audience and the use case. And so how do you really build a bridge between that? And so that's why we've been working on this sports data exchange initiative, and then getting that involved with other working groups across different verticals, mostly within media and entertainment. It's been a huge challenge, but it's been pretty exciting to see what we've been able to come up with, because it's not a one-for-one, right? You have to be able to kind of build something in the middle, but it has to still be flexible enough that people can build upon it, but also, grounded in sound definitions and classifications.
Gaia, what does that friction look like inside of a distributed org like PBS, where different stations, teams, and platforms may classify the same content but differently, like what these guys have been talking about?
Yeah, I would say what I had discovered when I took up this role about 8 years ago is that they, within the organization, we have definitions, we interpret terms in a different way depending on what our needs are. And speaking, particularly to classification of shows, there could be a huge breakdown in how our data is published and received by, data aggregators, and how they process it and push it out to audiences. And what we end up seeing are discrepancies, anomalies, and, how seasons are identified, episode sequences, and so forth, because we have a misclassification problem within the organization. And so I think the friction kind of comes along where producers who are producing the content have an idea of what their, content is supposed to represent. But they don't know what they don't know unless they're told, So what we have to do within PBS is make sure that the teams that work closely with our producers have a clear understanding of how a series is classified apart from what a franchise is, or when does a series become a sub-series, or how do we again classify when we end up expanding the universe of a title. And what we end up seeing sometimes is that even within the organization, you would think we'd be under the same business model when it comes to our content, but we have different approaches depending on the business goals of different departments. And one department might say, we don't have the bandwidth to create web pages for something we consider a sub-series, or that's just how we've been doing it all these years. So another part of the friction is, again, that change management that comes when you have people who've been operating in a certain way for so long, and then someone like me comes along and tells you, like, well, you should probably think about doing it this way. So you get a lot of pushback in some respects. So it takes a lot of buy-in. It takes actual tangible evidence to show them the evidence, the anomalies that we're seeing once the data has been published. Once I bring that in through the task of compliance monitoring, just kind of, again, working with the vendor that takes screenshots of our data, what it looks like to the audience, and then showing them, this is what your viewers are seeing. They're confused. The people who receive our data, who try to process that data, they're confused. They come back to us. They want to verify, is this the correct season? Is this the correct episode sequence? And that all falls under how we classify our series. So I would say it takes a lot of back and forth, a lot of communication, but without that true evidence to show stakeholders, then, it takes forever to get people to, make those changes possible.
The question I had while prepping this is who's the first one? So there's obviously could be a lot of misrepresented data and things not classified right. And for me, things I come across, I'll send screenshots, whatever, to friends that work as the media orgs in our industry, of course. And like, I'm kind of that first line, like I discovered it first, but without, I guess, me doing that for everybody, because that's not realistic. Like, who is most of the time that first person to see, hey, this doesn't look right? Like,
I mean, Kirby, I'll jump in. Like we get feedback from platforms every day. So, as part of our survey, we talk to platforms, and their response is 70% of the content metadata has some missing piece. Genres, descriptions, artwork in the wrong resolution or the wrong format. So the platforms are very vocal, obviously, with service providers, and we pass that on to our customers. So I would say, there's a loud voice, asking, for fixes, but it's not easy to always fix. And, we'll talk about some of the things that Amagi is trying to do to fix that maybe later in the session.
Can I piggyback off of what Paul just said? I'm sorry. And I just saw someone's comment about viewers will also report back and give you feedback about what they're seeing. And so again, a lot of my work is working closely with our local stations, and they will see something because a viewer might have left a message at their station, or they can identify it on their own as they're doing sort of their pre-work to make sure that everything looks good. And when it doesn't, when there's something missing, or that's not the information that I sent, they usually come to my team to help with troubleshooting and that support. And then we basically try to decipher, like, what are the issues? What are you seeing? Like you mentioned, is there missing artwork? Or did you know that you're supposed to deliver artwork? Again, a lot of times stations are like, we don't know what we don't know. Teach us your ways. So it's very important for us to be able to have centralized focus on helping those stations address those issues and to figure out what to do the next time they have to escalate. Because a lot of times they don't know, they don't have a contact at these data aggregators, and they work through us. So a lot of times those issues come directly to me and my team, and then we work to figure it out.
Gotcha. Richard, walk us through the difference between identifying a piece of content and then properly cataloging it.
A pet peeve of mine. They're both very important. Cataloging, everyone experiences, that's the collection and curation of the metadata to describe the thing. Librarians do this all the time. The problem with cataloging, as we've discussed, is it's different all over the place. What I think is important and how I think it should be presented for this purpose may be entirely different from this purpose. So cataloging can't really help automation. It can't help supply chain efficiencies, because everyone's got to step in and say, well, you called it that, I call it this. Okay, those are the same thing. Or no, they're different. With identification, that gives you the hook that you can say, this thing is that. Because the machine can't transact on something with authority without knowing what it is confidently. So once you have identification, then you can do things like acquire the metadata you need from different sources, aggregate it together, because you're not going to get it all from one place, or know that when I deliver this thing to that place, I need to do this to it. Back when I was at Technicolor, we call those the recipes. When you deliver to this service, you need to follow a certain recipe to make it their version. But without knowing up front what it is, the identification, and without having the good metadata backing that, the cataloging, you can't do that. You can't really run a business at scale without those two things done well in combination.
Dustin, how's that play out in sports, where you're identifying a league, a game, player, venue, all that?
Yeah, I think Richard said it really well. Cataloging versus identification, and the use case really makes a difference. I think when we look at it from traditional sports data structures, you're talking about not only use cases for sports tech and sports businesses that are serving fans, but from these fans, these are long-held, passionate views of fandom and following their favorite teams. So you could think of when we store team names, player names, league names. We can have up to half a dozen to a dozen different aliases, right? I mean, I grew up in Dallas, so there's Dallas Cowboys, Americans team, DAL. And then when you look at that at the title level, is it home and away, home v away? And so from our perspective, when we think about a central sort of cataloging for all the different use cases, then we have to be able to accommodate all of those with that one identification to hook then into. And so that's really the challenge. But when you look at the different use cases, different countries, different languages, and how folks talk about that, which is really related to how fans speak about it, right? When they're consuming sports content and then sharing what they have to say between their friends and family. Then we have to put all of that in there. But yeah, it's the same exact challenges for traditional TV shows and movie titles as well.
Gail, if two PBS stations agree, they catalog they know what the program is, but disagree on the format, like what problems does it open up?
Agree on the format in regards to like
there's some discrepancy between what one station's classifying something versus another.
Well, what you're going to have are conflicting data just out there for people to then try to surface and watch that program. You'll have people questioning what is the right one and so forth. One of the things that, again, we try to do here at PBS is work with our, programming team, again, like our editorial lead, to work across producers, including like our producing stations, getting them to, again, understand this is how you should talk to producers, how you should identify types of programming, and then make sure that when you're in these conversations with these stations and these producing stations, as well as our, external producers that come along into the PBS system, is making sure that, our own internal teams know how to communicate to the external teams, letting them know this is how the industry describes the show, like how it should be produced, how it should be formatted, and how it should be classified. And once we start processing that information, whether we register it with EIDR, it's going to help link it to other data sources, therefore making sure that we're all simpatico and that audiences can find exactly what they're looking for without having to second guess. We've had challenges, with organizations that use our data for reporting purposes and they have to come back to us just to make sure, is this the type of classification the show is this the correct season? And that takes a lot of going back and forth with people. And we want to be able to have those conversations early on at the production life cycle before it gets too far down to post-production and we've already published the content. So when these two stations are saying, well, we call it this, we call it that, we're trying to work at PBS to make sure that those conversations happen early enough so that everyone is on the same page about this is the type of show that it should be. And these are the requirements that the industry is expecting.
Can I just jump in very quickly?
Always. I was calling on
you.
you next anyway, Rhodes. So
Okay, I was wondering if something was wrong with my camera. Very quickly, just what we've seen, because we work with the content suppliers who are trying to transform how they operate, is data is scattered internally in many cases across different siloed teams. Nobody is operating on a central source of truth, or I shouldn't say nobody, but that should be the goal. And once you have that, then you can transform that data to meet the distribution needs based on that via APIs, et cetera. Even AI, you're going to want to plug in, you better have an API behind all that data. So what is the source of truth can vary with the aggregators. We've seen with matching, somebody might have episode 1, part 1, episode 1, part 2, and somebody might say episode 1, episode 2. How do you match that? These are the kind of challenges we have. And when people have older catalogs, there was no governance then. It was like, okay, it's on TV, it's over, throw it away, or get it ready for syndication. But now you have that opportunity to pull all that data easily into a system and get it prepped so that you can output it however anybody needs it.
And once content is set and it's been realized, hey, we have some metadata problems, is that at that point when your content's already distributed or attempted to be distributed to these platforms, like, is that now become a super expensive fix that was solvable before? Or what does that look like when you're at that point, when you didn't have that centralized source of truth?
So, you have to modernize and get ready for the future. And, with distribution being much easier and digital now, and can you automate a lot of these tasks? And now with AI, instead of trying to find the needle in the haystack, the human is finding a needle in a lot less hay from AI. I'd still say put a human in the loop, but the cost isn't terrible. It's just you have to have everybody buy in and all the teams work off a central database. Richard has his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump back to something. IBM did a study back in the day on software development. And they found that if an error got past requirements, it costs 10 times as much to fix it in specification. It costs 10 times as much to fix it during development. It costs 10 times as much to fix it once it was deployed. Similar problems are here. It's much cheaper to fix it earlier, to do it right. The little bit of extra effort to do it right up front is so much paid for by avoiding the cost that will incur later. Fixing these things once they get out your door, it's much more expensive than it would have been to fix inside your house. Once it's through your plant, it's much more expensive than it would have fixed on ingest. It's just the earlier you can correct these, the better your governance process is. The actual less you'll be spending all of this, which means more margin.
Yeah, I mean, makes sense to me, Richard. What makes a metadata standard? What makes a metadata standard useful enough for companies to justify adopting it?
Well, the first thing that makes you useful is Paul, who has his hands up.
Oh, Paul.
Go ahead and answer, but I was going to add a couple layers of complexity to the whole conversation.
Go for it, Paul.
All right. So I think you were asking about standardization, and we're a big supporter of IDER and believe that standards help everybody. But I will say that there are target platforms that require Grace Note data, which brings into another element of ownership of metadata, who licenses what, from who, and who gets usage of that data. So that was one more layer of complexity, that we deal with every day. And then I think it was touched upon by Dustin and others, versioning of the content for international. There are different rating systems in different countries. There are obviously different, audio tracks. There are edited versions of movies in different territories. So, the complexity, is compounded when you start adding all these different layers to the problem. And these, obviously cause a lot of issues for different content producers and for the downstream platforms.
And then I'll jump in on the earlier question of what's making a good metadata standard. Well, I think it does all start with the standards, because you can't automate chaos. So you have to have standards, internal standards, AKA governance. You need that. If your house is not in order, you're not going to do anything well, or you'll do terrible things much faster if you try and apply automation to it. Let's put it that way. But the standard does have to be fit for purpose. If it's not a useful standard, if it's not going to do what you need it to do, then you're going to have to do so much work on top of it to make it useful to you. It's not going to be that standard anymore. And then when you try and deliver to somebody else, you've gone so far off the reservation, you can't get it back again. I like to think of it, the ideal situation is like in media delivery, you have a mezzanine file, which is your high def master that contains everything from which you can generate all the things you need to deliver down the road. Ideally, you have a metadata master that is your aggregate of all the metadata in one place, controlled and governed very well, that you can use then with a standardized interface to ingest other standard sets. Because you're not going to get everything from one place. It's going to be coming from multiple places. But if you have standards that with interfaces between them, you can bring the data into your master, you can bring the data into you can bring the images in, you can bring whatever in, and then again, you can deliver that back out again. You say, okay, for this deliverable, I need to use the short synopsis. I need to do this. It best be in Quebecois, because if you give them Parisian French, they're going to freak out. All those things can then go into your deliverable out of your metadata master. But if it's not fit for purpose and useful to you, everyone's going to fight the process. And they say, oh, it would be so much better if we just customized it, did it bespoke. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of pain and anguish. And every time a human has to touch something, Google did a study. Anytime a human has to touch anything, it costs them $1. $1 per title per touch. And that accumulates quickly. And so you want to make sure what you're doing, you're applying standards appropriately in a way that will let you automate the supply chain in your own house and in all your partners, so you don't have to have the humans involved.
And
so what then become? Go ahead, Rhodes.
Just very quickly to put a cap on that is somebody in the org has to take ownership and say, this is what is got to be governed, and then put systems in place that follow that governance and monitor it and make sure the data is coming in. And, with AI, you can even start identifying the holes and gaps in your data. So, I think exactly to Richard, do it right the first time. And if you're using a third-party source, go in there and then add your data needs through that. And then you have the record you're looking for and can output that everywhere.
So Rhodes, and then I'm going to get back to you, Richard. Rhodes, in this scenario, who should be the owner of that core metadata record?
Gaia. Somebody like her in an org exists or should exist and is looking very closely at what metadata is going in and being created and what metadata is going out and how the partners are reviewing it and then making any changes that are needed inside the record so that it can be repurposed.
And Dustin, when that authoritative source is wrong, who then you think should have the power to correct that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I hear what everyone's saying here, and I agree from everything we've seen within M&E, but we actually on the sports side look at things kind of in the reverse when we look at source of truth and standards, right? So where you look and season series titles, like where is the source of truth? What is the source of truth? Within sports, there is a source of truth, right? There is a governing body with a fixed number of events. And then conversely, that's opposite correlation is the standards. We can't have necessarily standards. We need to be able to fit into whatever sort of standards that may or may not exist in the various verticals and use cases that do that. And so the question that you're asking specifically within M&E, that's less for traditional sports because where we want to report on core data entities, and that's the leagues, the teams, the games, teams, players, and stadiums. And then we need to be able to make sure that we can own that only just because of the dynamic nature of sports. It changes year to year when teams move cities and change names, sponsors come in and out of stadiums, new leagues pop up, and then players move from, say, college to pro to maybe a broadcasting type of role. And so we need to be able to do that for continuity's sake and just make sure that it's accurate. But then when you look in, outside of live events and traditional TV and movie shows, obviously there's different rules that govern that.
All right, Richard, bringing us back. What becomes the bigger bottleneck? Is it standards that don't fit the workflow, like you're talking about that perceived need of customization, or organizations that just don't have the ownership or discipline to enforce them?
Well, in that case, it's the latter, because all good intentions will fall apart if you don't have governance. So I say it starts with the standards. If the standards aren't useful to you, you're not going to adopt them, or you're going to fight the adoption. If you try to be too onerous with the governance, people are going to fight that as well. But if you don't have the governance, I like Fox Classic, back when it was 20th Century Fox, they had Foxopedia. Because they had, I think, over 20, I don't know the exact number, but over 20 different systems that did different things on the studio lot. But they brought that all together into a centralized repository, which was the ultimate source of truth. But each data point was owned by somebody. And the governance said, if there's an error, you can't fix it in the central system. You've got to fix it in the source so it flows back to the central. From the central system, you can deliver wherever you need to go, because that's your golden record. That's your master set. And so they didn't try to force people into something they wouldn't adopt. They wouldn't say, we can't make everybody follow the exact same thing because there are unique needs. But if we can get them to follow standard interfaces, standard APIs, as Rhodes was mentioning, that we can exchange that data, we can aggregate that data, we can clean it, cleanse it, verify it, identify errors, identify gaps, and put warnings back, say, hey, you're missing this, you need to do that, system over there. Let the owner of that take care of it, let them work the way they need to work, but do something the organization can support that meets the organization's needs. Because that will be the best path to success. And that then allows you, once you have that sanity in your organization, to deal with the weird deliverable. Well, I got to do something weird for this guy, okay, but I'm going to do it the same way for him every time. Once I've done it once, now I can keep on delivering that to him in his weird little way that he wants, make him happy, but I've maintained my sanity.
Gotcha. So Dustin, we were previously talking about a World Cup example I had where I was trying to check a score of a game. It said it was finished. The game very much was still happening. And I use that example because sports makes metadata failures visible rather immediately. And if something's showing the wrong game, a stale score, the wrong stream, like where does the damage of that appear first? And what I want to do here is kind of just follow the money and connect this to business outcomes.
Yeah, well, when we think about kind of our universe, at least within larger global sports tech, it all starts with the fan. That is the center of the universe, right? And so we're trying to bring sports to them for entertainment, and we're trying to monetize that through various products and services. And so maybe unlike some other areas within sports, it goes back to this comment around source of truth. There is a source of truth. And so in our view, it's less about the standards within sports because sports oftentimes isn't the material driver of an entire business. It's just a material part of said business, right? And so it needs to be flexible in order to kind of meet where they are, but then make sure that there is a solid source of truth there. So in your example that you shared last week, we think about AI, however that sort of kind of fan monetized products are put together, using that as a grounding source of truth. Ensures that you're not bringing up some completed game from 3 years ago when you're asking for the scores of the game that's typically in progress right now. And there's not really a standard out there, right, to be able to give that source of truth. That's why we've been working with some of these working groups with IDER and others to try to see if there's something that we can take to market. But yeah, it's a real issue to not be able to know, here's the leagues that are currently in season, and of those leagues, here's the ones that have games being played today. Within those, here's the teams and players that are taking the field.
I would just add to that, Dustin, that we at Amagi can update the schedules basically in real time. As a game may go to overtime or be delayed or otherwise change the end point. And we can republish those EPGs and that metadata, but not all platforms will update their own EPGs. So there's definitely a platform role in helping to automate this and make sure that discoverability is in its best place. The other thing I was going to comment on was roads. I think you mentioned and we're a big supporter of having the metadata czar who can really help organizations drive through standards, one good spec. But we always are seeing fields that are left out or artwork that doesn't match the target platform. And so one of the things that Amagi did at NAB was we announced the launch of our agentic media operations. So we are now using AI, as you mentioned, to help the content specialists fill in fields, create and map genres, do the artwork resolutions for different target platforms. And we just announced launching that in production with customers. So it's early days for us, but we're trying to fill in those gaps. And the gaps certainly exist, despite all the best efforts and good intentions, at the source. So that's a really important offering that we're pushing out to the marketplace.
And
That's
Can I
cool.
piggyback off of that?
Always.
Just again, people don't know what they don't know when it comes to how much of my data should I be supplying to put out there for discoverability. And over the years, you'd see variations of here's my raw production information, 500 word synopsis, 95 character title, maybe I give you a genre, maybe I don't. Sometimes they would just submit whatever. What we ended up establishing for our stations and for our producers is just creating a simple, metadata based profile where they know exactly what they need. And we did this based off of our partnership with ITER as we were starting to incorporate, ITER into our workflow, and knowing that we had to meet the minimum requirements of data that is needed for sufficient content discovery and connecting to other data corroborators, was just saying, let's just start, making sure that our stations and producers have this simple little one sheet that outlines everything that they need all the way down to genre, even keywords, just to get them used to saying, oh, did I supply this? Did I supply that? This at the very minimum is what I need for discoverability. And then we'll focus on key art, as everyone, pretty much everyone mentioned here. Key art is just as important with discoverability. When you think of even young children, I had young children at one time, they're now teenagers, but when they were very little, they couldn't read. The first thing that would engage them is just key art, being able to identify a character on the screen. If you're like using the Netflix platform, you just pick a character and you automatically find that show. And now there's a whole profile built around my child and what they like. And so that's how they discover new content without even being able to read words. So we talk a lot about, the catalog metadata that is needed for discoverability. But artwork is vital because as a human, that's the first thing we engage with, that, immediately catches our eye. So I always think that's very important. But again, just making sure that at minimum, our producers know what is required of them is the first step to improving their data quality.
can I just throw in, art is a metadata point, and there is different art for every distributor, I need a landscape, I need a poster, you can't have the theatrical, I just need a title treatment, etc. And then I'd go a step further and say even the trailers and the promotional video is a really key other piece of metadata that, or we should consider the trailers metadata as well in that discoverability. Actually, metadata is infrastructure, and if you're not taking it seriously, your content's invisible. Nobody's going to find it if you've got incomplete, bad metadata. And if they see it, you're taking a reputational hit if it's bad metadata. And that is, you spend all this money, and because you didn't pay attention to metadata, people reject your title. So,
Yeah, and it's true. And I will say, and this is something that I definitely warn my producers about, that again, if you're not supplying the required metadata, or you're not following their required formatting, you're leaving it up to these aggregators to take editorial license with your content. They're going to format it in the way that they need it for their platform, and they're going to go with it, and it's going to cost money to fix that on the back end and make those changes. So again, at the very top of the production life cycle, we make sure that the editorial leads are having these conversations about even the length of your title. You don't want your title truncated, across a traditional electronic program guide. If you're going to have a long title, maybe you have some contractual agreement that says it has to include all these different elements in your title, then I always say front load the most important parts of your title, because if it's truncated, at least the viewer, who has about 3 to 5 seconds to determine if they want to watch your show, can see the most important aspects. I even tell them we have a whole titling best practice worksheet that we share, where even just a simple title formula, topic plus intent, that is a title that's going to engage people. We usually a long, boring title, very sciencey, yeah, it tells you, it gives you something, but at the same time, like I tell producers, you might like the title, you might love the title, it's your baby, you've been working on this for years, but you need to understand, how is the audience going to engage with the title that I just selected for them? And so you really have to take an audience first approach to how you create your data to be pushed out there for people to then discover.
Yeah,
I
I
think
couldn't
that
agree more. That's the fact that you have kind of those guidelines is really gold, and that can help with automation on the AI side. So, think of that as your prompt input, to our AI engine, and we can generate those, titles or short descriptions or medium-sized descriptions or whatever you might need, based on your policies. So I think that's amazing.
So let's close this out with AI. But before we do, and just kind of this idea of following the money, is I think the impact of incomplete or rather not optimized metadata is clear to the viewer. If you can't find it, it's not searchable, it's not discoverable, it's not indexable. Like you can't watch it. And that like a subscription environment, if I don't see what I'm looking for, I might not think I need to continue paying. I think that's very clear. But what about from an advertising perspective and the impact that just missing data and limited data could have roads?
So, we hear a lot of complaints about header bidding from marketers. Oh, I get a genre, I get a title, Yellowstone, Western. That doesn't tell me anything. I can't target, programmatically when I'm on that bid cycle. So the richer the header bidding goes, the richer data that's in there, then it gives them more to target. And now we're even seeing them license our data so they can go to a brand and say, hey, these are the shows we think we want to target on CTV. So that data is also creating revenue now. I mean, it creates revenue, but even directly on ad bidding.
Yeah, Rhodes, I'll add to that we're beginning to add IAB tags, with 20 different uh, genres, subgenres, categories, to help with that targeting. And we can do it contextually, scene by scene, so that every ad break is targeting the IAB tags that make sense for that scene. So it's getting pretty exciting, the kind of targeting that we can do.
Oh, why have you? I said we're going to go to AI. So let's go to AI. Got you on the mic. What metadata tasks can AI handle reliably, and where do people still need to step in your opinion?
So in the agentic ops, tools that we've built into Amagi Now's platform, everything is human approved. So it can go off and generate, all sorts of crazy stuff. Humans have to approve it at this point. But the tools, are improving literally daily as they get experience, as they understand what works, what doesn't work. So what it can do today, even today, is quite amazing. I'll say on the contextual side, we're doing live, real-time contextual understanding of the video so that we can do the IAB tagging for the ad pods. And it's early days. We're not doing it on every channel. We're doing it on certain channels, and we're learning how that works. But it's definitely raising CPMs. We're getting better quality ads, better targeting, obviously, but actually better CPM, effective CPM. So it helps with monetization. So all this metadata, whether it's discovery from the consumer's perspective or on the advertising side, things are definitely improving every day.
Rhodes, you think we should outsource everything to AI, or should humans still step in? What do you think?
No. We had a situation where somebody was like, "Hey, they were trying to match to our catalog. They had the Odyssey 2026, and that's all the data they had. And we have two titles that are the Odyssey 2026 year. So the computer is like, I don't know which one. You don't have more data. The more data, so in our matching process, our match API, we look at, who's the director? Give us more. A title a year is not enough. And if you have to resolve that, you need a human and they need to dig deeper. So the more data, the better the automation. But I think you really always need a human on the loop, maybe not in the loop, but on the loop, monitoring what is happening with the AI agents or AI. And, we look at it to even clean our data. What gaps do we have and help us get humans to focus on the right area that we need a judgment call. And I don't think AI can make the best judgment calls 100%.
Dustin, you want to chime in?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to this, where do we see traditional sports structures fitting into the various verticals, that sports is not a core driver, but a material driver. And so we see ourselves kind of one layer below. Like we have our commercial business, live scores and stats and odds and all these other things. But when we think about like the foundational layer, and that's what we're pushing forward with this sports data exchange initiative with IDER and some others, one, trying to solve this kind of open permissive problem that exists. I think Paul mentioned this earlier with, I think you mentioned Gracenode, and there's some other competitors in other areas as well. I think Radar's in betting and gaming, and Stats is in tech, but they're really kind of beholden over this. And it's like, look, if everybody's going to jump on, it needs to be open and available to everyone, because not only does it go throughout, in this case, the entire supply chain, but then it extends to things like advertising, ad tech with CTV, and then AI kind of powered products. And so as we look at pushing this stuff out within M&E, we're doing the same stuff within ad tech as well. So working with an IAB Tech Lab, and I think it sounds like Paul is doing some of that stuff within the Amagi platform as well. But we're able to extend the content taxonomy from the sport level all the way down to specific teams and players that then are time bound within the events that they're going to be taking the field on. And like you said with AI, the same exact thing happens there. There has to be a source of truth. That needs to be available to anyone and everyone that wants to be able to come in and use that, because they're not living in a bubble, right? They are connected to ad tech, which is connected to various platforms, which is then connected to second screen and mobile, which is ultimately connected back to ticketing and fandom and merchandising. So really the wider ecosystem needs kind of an underlying foundational source of truth to be able to connect to. And it's just as important in AI as it is anything else.
Richard, you mentioned to me previously that structured data, reliable identifiers, and clear constraints can get AI roughly 90% of the way there. How do you keep the ambiguous final 10% from contaminating the rest of the catalog?
Well, the first trick is getting it down to 90-10. I wish AI was garbage in, garbage out. With AI, its decisions are confident. It is certain it has the right answer. If you ask it to explain its decision making, it actually reverse engineers its own decision to justify how it got there. It doesn't really show you how it got there. It's an explanation of how it might have gotten there. So if you don't have good controls in place, we're using AI, but we run audits against our AI. Say, did the AI make the right decision? Do we think this one, I think I want a human to double check to make sure it did it right. If it's wrong, that's an opportunity for a teaching case to improve the AI for the next time. We certainly don't want to let them loose on their own. And we really don't want to let them loose if they've received poor or incomplete training. Because if you start with well-structured, well-populated metadata with identifiers attached, so the AI doesn't have to guess. It knows which Odyssey this article is talking about. It knows for certain this is the thing it's supposed to deal with. It can bring those together, and now it can do things with it. You can feed AI unstructured data all day long. It will do things with it. But you'll never discover, or not be able to discover easily, where it's gone wrong. So we do trust but verify. We use it, but we have checks in place. We do audits. We have rules in place to say, hey, go only this far. In this case, do involve someone. Make that ask. If you can't reach this threshold, then yeah, we got to bring the human in to verify this. But the human verification is much faster than having them do it in the first place. So we still save money even when we have to bring a human in, but we are not anywhere near trusting it 100% of the time. You have to have a robust verification and auditing program or support program around the AI to make sure it doesn't go rogue.
And Kirby, somebody mentioned at another conference, AI is not an oracle, it's an intern, treated as such. And I would say we're still at that stage right now. It's of course improving by leaps and bounds. But I asked it about one movie, just testing it, and it told me all this great stuff about that movie. It was completely wrong. And so it can.
But confident in its answer, though, right?
It said this is it, but it hallucinated everything about that title. So be careful. And Paul, you said human on the loop. You're there.
Oh man, my AI compliments me all the time. I'm thinking maybe it's lying.
Sorry, Richard. Where you're talking to it and you call it out on something, it will apologize. Oh, I'm so sorry, and then do it again. Because it's not reasoning. It's calculating the odds of what the next word should be. That's what it's doing. It's taking a whole corpus of information saying, okay, statistical analysis, what are the odds I should follow this the with a big? No, I should actually follow it with apple. Okay, I'm going to say apple. That's all it's really doing. So that's where that 90-10, that last 10 is the human reasoning, because AI is not reasoning. And it is absolutely confident in everything it does, absolutely assured. But if you're not keeping tabs on it, like I would not let an AI agent respond to my email on its own, because it'll do fine most of the time, but it's going to go bad suddenly in an unpredictable way if it's not being monitored.
Well, you're that human intervention, which is, I think, what we're all saying we need. So we got about 4 or 5 minutes left. I want to do a final round, 20 or 30 seconds. The question is, what's the first question an executive should ask to determine whether their metadata operation is healthy? And Gaia, let's start with you. Happy to repeat the question.
Yes, repeat it one more time.
Yeah. What's the first question an executive should ask to determine whether their metadata operation is healthy?
Well, the first question they should ask is my metadata complete? Are we all set? Or is everything there? I mean, at the end of the day, these executives, these stakeholders, they should want their show to be found. The first thing that they should be encouraged to make sure that the organization is doing their job is making sure that we're collecting the metadata early enough. And that's sometimes a year out. So do we have everything that we need? We're at the table with our producers. Are there any questions? Is there anything left on the table? Let's move forward.
And I guess they don't know what they don't know. So where to even begin? My goodness, Dustin.
Yeah, I think I can only speak to sports specifically within live events, but as we were saying earlier, it's a little bit of an inverse here, just because within sports there's such a concrete source of truth. And so, from our perspective, it is what is our definitions around taxonomy and classification? Because depending on who you ask, a league, a game, or whatever could have different answers, but all be right. So we got to make sure that we're speaking the same language before we get into identification on those core entities. From once you're aligned there, then it's obviously still a tall task, but it becomes much easier once we align on what those definitions are.
All right, Paul, what's the first question we should ask to determine if our metadata operation is a healthy one?
Yeah, I would say, we kind of anchor everything with revenue and cost. So on the revenue side, how are you going to maximize your monetization? The answer there is you got to have complete metadata, 100%, supporting industry standards, and then of course tools, right? Automation tools, so that you don't have a bunch of people doing all this manually. So to lower the costs of making sure you have complete metadata, I do think AI can play an important role in helping with that process. So maximizing, revenue and discovery, minimizing your cost to get there, and that's what Amagi is focused on.
All right, Rhodes.
Is our organization have a single source of truth for all of our metadata? And do we have governance and somebody who owns that governance in our org? That would be a healthy metadata source. And then I would also just throw in, and do we have API behind it?
All right, Richard.
I'm going to double down on what Rhodes said. Governance. What is our governance process? Where does our data come from? What have we done to it? Is our Spanish language synopsis proofed by third party or us by a native speaker? Or do we screen scrape IMDb, run it through Google Translate and call it done? If you can't understand where you're getting your metadata, how you're verifying it, how you're vetting it, how you're making sure it's complete and accurate and fit the purpose, then no matter how much it is, it's not going to be trusted.
All right, cool, guys. Well, if there's one takeaway, it's this: without metadata, content's just a stupid file. Metadata is what turns it into a business asset, something that can move through the supply chain, get found, stay compliant, create advertised value, and support reliable automation with human intervention, right? So tomorrow, the Streaming Wars, we're releasing a guide to metadata that goes deeper into the operational costs, commercial stakes, and AI implications behind everything we talked about today. I'll get with Jose and make sure that we distributed that out to anybody that's interested. Appreciate all my wonderful panelists, and appreciate everybody listened. Hope the chat was valuable, and all hope to connect with you soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kirby. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Kirby.
Thank you guys so much for a fantastic
everybody.
conversation and sharing your expertise and perspective. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We hope you enjoyed the discussion and came away with some valuable insights. And I'm also very happy to report that the chat that this session was recorded and will be made available for viewing on demand in the next couple of days. We also invite you to join us for 2 upcoming sessions over the next 2 weeks. First, on August 12th, OTT.X Buzz will take a mid-year look at the state of streaming, including hot topics such as AI, live sports, changing viewer habits, new monetization models, and the trends to watch throughout the second half of the year. Then the following week, on August 19th, we'll bring together technology leaders to explore the critical infrastructure decisions behind launching, scaling, and modernizing a streaming platform. The conversation will cover architecture, operational ownership, reliability, cost, and long-term growth. You can find more information and register for these sessions and everything else that OTTX has going on at OTTX.org. Thank you again so much for joining us. We hope to see you next time and that you have a great day. Thank you.